Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back, all you listeners and viewers of Live from the Heartland. This is the second segment of our show for the week of July 18th, and we're doing more of the oldies but goodies. We had our friend Corky Siegel on talking about the Woodstock Folk Festival and the history of his music. And now we're going to do a similar thing with Abe Peck, who I had the honor of having dinner with him and a lot of other octogenarians, or almost, recently. And I said, Abe, it's time you come on the show. He said, sure. How are you out there? You've been driving.
Good. I'm glad to have the opportunity to fill up a bucket list thing, and then that was a fun dinner. Probably a bad dinner to have on a school night, a little overserved, but that's okay. And
that's well. Let's start off with what little bit about you. Where do you come from? You're an editor, writer, and journalism professor. You've done the martial arts. You know about Count Dante. Fill us in about yourself, where you came from, and how you got to Chicago.
Grew up in the Bronx, went to school. When I was in graduate school, I was working full-time and going to school full-time. It was just too much. And also the siren song of the 60s was starting to sing to me. I had a weird moment where I thought I was getting married, so I went into a reserve unit. And then I got out of the reserve unit because they told me my eyes were bad, which was a blessing. I had moved down to the Lower East Side and thought about actually not reporting to the Army, but I got a job in Chicago. But I'm a little out of order. So 5 of us went to the Haight-Ashbury for the summer of '67 in a Volkswagen van. We drove all the way across the country, 5 freaks in the bus. And when I came back, I needed a job. So we had passed through Chicago, and there was a scene on Wells Street, among which was a shop called Headland, which was a paper and pipe shop. And the current claim to fame of that is one of the owners was the guy who found the Yippee pig for this in 1968. Anyway, I liked Chicago when I came through it. So I got a job as a company salesman for a book company. Still kind of freaky, but I needed some money for this after finishing this trip. And that job failed after I drove the company car to the Pentagon demonstration in 1967. But I was very conscientious. They were all in the car, and I was the only driver because it was a company car. So which is probably scarier than letting someone else drive. But anyway, I fell into the scene because there was a magazine called The Realist, a very important satirical magazine edited by a guy named Paul Krasner. And Paul had gotten mugged in the Lower East Side, which was turning for the worse, and was looking for a place to put out The Realist, a farm. And there were a bunch of freaks in Chicago, and one of the guys was well off, and he had a gentleman's farm. So I volunteered his farm, of course, without asking him. And in exchange, and I wrote this really kind of rapidograph, Crayola kind of letter. In exchange, I got Jerry Rubin, the arch yippie, talking to me about this festival that in retrospect sounded like Woodstock a year early and how it was going to be great. So the first article I wrote for The Seed, which was a local underground paper, kind of a flower power paper, first issue was the Mother's Day Being. And I wrote this article about this festival. And then in true fashion of the time, about 3 months later, I was the editor. And as you well know, 1968, things really started taking a turn. Martin Luther King was murdered. We had a demonstration, the April Peace March, which was a dress rehearsal snuffed by the police down at the Civic Center. And then, of course, the convention. I have a cover here. I don't know if people can see it. The Seed was kind of culture before politics, and then the meshing of them. This was our kind of mix of barbed wire and Tim Leary words on the cover. And I stayed at The Seed for several years, increasingly political, increasingly as the times demanded, more militant. And then it just got a little too much for me, and I left. And I became a writer. I started writing. I was broke. I had jobs throwing boxes in a warehouse. I had jobs driving a cab. but I like to write, and I guess I left the book reviews for the Chicago Daily News, which was the best of the 4 newspapers in Chicago, then the 4 dailies, and then I got hired at Rolling Stone. But you probably want to back up and talk about the publishing scene in the '60s. I think you wanted to talk.
Well, I want to do a little of that. Where was that farm that you were doing? Was that the Carmel?
It was just outside the farm where the pig was from was in the Northwest. The farm where this guy had was somewhere north. I'm not sure where. It wasn't Karma Farm or any of the farms that when people left the city were in the Kettle Moraine in Wisconsin.
Well, the seed was around, early on. You worked there, I think, 68 to 71. Yeah. I was looking for a place to, we were starting Rising Up Angry as a newspaper to build an organization. We were a little more militant. And we first went to a paper called The Kaleidoscope, where Keats Millard, who did start the Karma Farm, had started a paper, The Kaleidoscope. It was over on Armitage near Sheffield. We laid the paper out there, and then there were other people around. There was a paper called The Bridge, and then I remember you were on Wrightwood, and that's where I met Lester Doré, who I got to do he was doing artwork for the Seed, and I got him to do the logo for Rising Up Angry.
Yeah, well, a couple of things there. Yeah, so Kaleidoscope came, there was a paper called Milwaukee Kaleidoscope, and they were ambitious and wanted to open up in Chicago, and somehow they and Skeets hooked up, and they thought that the Seed should be more militant, so they started this paper. Eventually, we merged with them. One of the things with the Seed was we had a lot of success with this army of seed sellers, and we were selling 20, even 30,000 copies an issue. So we had a little more resources and a little bit more money, and occasionally we even paid ourselves some pittance. So we had a lot of facilities like light tables and things like that. Also, so for some reason, the images that this was low-end publishing, but enabled by a technological disruption, the offset press. And early on, we'd had some speed freaks would come in, and you had to stipple the negatives. You couldn't have holes in them, so they loved that kind of work. Filling in holes. So kind of druggy volunteers. But we had we had more resources. The Black Panthers laid out their paper. You guys laid out your paper. And Mike, there's a moment right during the convention. We were then on LaSalle Street, around the corner from the Cops, and across the street from Moody Bible Institute. And you floated in, and you took my hand, and you went like you said, "This was before," and then you folded my fingers down and said, "This is now." And
I did that to you, huh?
Yeah, and a little conversion experience. And the other thing about that office that was germane to the convention was, so it was an office where you had to step down. It used to be a dry cleaner, and you stepped down to get to the counter. And during the convention, suddenly our windows were shot out, and a couple of bullet holes came through the window. And, we were fools rush in where angels fear to tread kind of thing. We ran out in the street, and the only car on the street was a police car going north. So because they were around the corner from us, so they left us a couple of presents in the window. And,
they'll do that.
Yeah, right. And but then after when things really got so intense that people were starting to either go to the farms or find. For me, I always liked writing. And of course the culture was absorptive, and the politics were changing a bit. The papers were becoming more liberal, and I was becoming, I guess, more mainstream. So we kind of met in the middle. And then Rolling Stone came along in '75. I moved to San Francisco, and Rolling Stone, to paraphrase A.J. Liebling, the writer, a journalist on another story, it was hipper than anything better and better than anything hipper, in terms of its quality. And I have 2 years on staff, and then about 12 years as a contributing editor. Came back to Chicago, worked at a couple of newspapers, worked at the News and Daily News, and then the Sun-Times. And then in 1980, a job opened up in Medill, because I was really a magazine guy. I liked the craft of magazines. I like putting together magazines, the flow. In print, but also on the internet now. I still see flow there. And I started teaching this stuff, but I also was doing a lot of magazine writing and consulting. You mentioned travel. I was a contributing editor for a magazine called Travel Weekly. I worked at Outside for a while, and I had all these great trips. I went to Tibet. I went to Senegal. For Rolling Stone, I went to South Africa with Schwarzenegger for the bodybuilding Mr. Olympia contest. So it was
Is there a movie about that?
pumping iron. I'm in it. Don't blink.
Yeah.
So it was. It was journalism has always been a way for me to make a bit of a difference, but also indulge curiosity, which I think is the most important thing any journalist can have. Curiosity and passion are still vital ingredients.
Well, I remember 75 coming out to, it was in between Rising Up Angry and founding of the Heartland Cafe. And it was the first time I had really taken off for a number of years and had a wonderful time going up and down the coast visiting people, including you.
Right.
And what I distinctly remember was a punch bowl that was spiked with some kind of LSD.
Sounds familiar.
Laughing gas.
That was the guy. Yeah, there was a guy on the staff who had a dental chair with laughing gas in it, and he also did like his LSD. So that's certainly plausible. Our memories, of course, are selective in those situations.
Yeah, well, I remember that, and I remember meeting Paul Krasner at that, and then
there you go.
That's enough of that. But what was it like shifting over to when you went to work at Northwestern? It's a formidable institution. We're not sure how they're handling certain things with the current administration in Washington, but we've always rooted for them. And you taught there for a long time.
I still do. I'm an emeritus in service. That's why I was in Chicago last week. But
so what do you do there? What do you?
I teach one class. I run a fellowship program where I bring in top executives to talk about journalism and top editors to talk about journalism. I teach one small class, which is a project class for companies trying to figure out everything from AI to changes in Google search to just what good articles are. I make a joke, Mike, that if I ran for dean twice and came in second twice, and bridesmaid revisited. But I told the current dean, who's a wonderful guy, that if I had been the dean during the encampments, I probably would have had to resign. Someone who still remembers the road being blocked. My hypocrisy, as old the Val Kilmer line in Tombstone. My hypocrisy only extends so far, and so that would have been a moment. But no, students are wonderful. They're scared right now. Some of them in the current job environment and the current maelstrom of changes that are going on, but they're very determined. They're very smart. They're very multimedia. And the curriculum, I teach mostly grad students. We have a master's program. The curriculum is very, very good in terms of embedding people, allowing them. The leader of my class, the student leader, is an environmental reporter, embedding with a climate magazine. So there's a happy medium there in a way. Again, I just try to find them jobs that are compatible,
what's it like for journalists these days? We hear.
Well, it's tough because.
What are the opportunities for jobs?
The opportunities, of course, in an odd way, I mentioned just as the offset press was a disruptor of big printing presses. My dad worked in a bookbindery, a proud union guy, when I was a kid, and with those giant presses, or when we were at the Marshall Field building, which is now where Trump's tower is, the press is vibrating when they started to print. And then, of course, the offset presses came along, and we could hire somebody to print our paper on the cheap. Well, now, of course, the barrier to entry, as we call it, is much lower. You can start something on the cheap. Some people will do that. Of course, they have to eat, which is always a problem. So how many break through? It's kind of like the NBA. A lot of people play basketball, but how many make it, There are jobs, there are foundations stepping up, but the big newspaper jobs, are obviously tight. And the big magazine jobs are obviously tight. Now I have students writing papers about the golden age of magazines, which isn't happening now. But there are also
some dogs barking here.
I do. I have one too, but she's being quiet. And so it's a tough time, but they're very resourceful, and there are jobs. Some companies are figuring it out. Again, I go back to Paul Krasner. You mentioned The Realist, which was a really formative magazine and an influence on the underground press. He talked about publishing when he first started. He was a wolf, and he went up on the cliff and he howled, and the wolves started howling back. People found the magazine, and there's some of that. You can howl on your particular interest and howl back. What's interesting to me, and I mentioned this to you when we got together, is that how much of this howling is going on the right. that they have figured out something that we figured out back in the day, which is that in a lot of ways, politics are downstream from culture. And there is this right-wing counterculture that has everything from wrestling to incels to, and a tremendous amount of publishing. So, yeah, there's Rachel Maddow, but there's also Joe Rogan. And then there are, 100 mini-me Joe Rogans, and Joe Rogan's kind of not just super right. He's more interesting than that. But there are just a lot of people who are figuring out making this cacophony, and of course, feeding into the orange leader. And I think we thought that we were on the come. A lot of our issues in the 70s when Carter got in, it was still kind of militant, but there were wins for the environment and looked like women. It looked like gay rights were opening up and women rights were opening up, and internationally things were changing. But there sure has been a snapback, and we have to fight the good fight.
What's your take on Joe Rogan? I remember I was driving across country a number of years ago with my family, and one of my sons said, "Check out this guy." And we listened to something. It didn't seem too terrible then, but then we got kind of critical of him.
Yeah, well, he kind of flipped.
He seems to have shifted all of a sudden. Yeah,
I don't know why. I don't listen to him that much. He's a presence. You have to encounter him. I mean, he did flip. At one point, he's a Democrat, People like idiosyncrasy, and they like a voice that punches through. And but what's interesting, even more than Rogan, is these guys that where there's an apparatus like Fox News, which allows opinion guys like Hannity and before him, Carlson, to essentially be the kind of Joe Rogans on mainstream media with huge huge circulations, a huge reach. And that's kind of different, we had The Nation and a bit of Rolling Stone and stuff like that. But these, I have this kind of mainstream right-wing hybrid, which is in some ways Trump is too, it's fundamentally different. And Rogan's an exemplar of that. I mean, there's Jon Stewart and Rachel Maddow, but there's a lot more stuff going on the right, Hannity and, those kind of guys.
Do you have what's your take on being optimistic? Are you optimistic about things to come? How do you compare what went on back in our day, which were terrible issues, but seem to still be with us and magnified?
Yeah, my hope is that I'll outlive some of this stuff, and it depends on which side of bed I roll out of, Mike. Some days I'm really depressed. I had lunch with one of my first students, is a Palestinian American who's a professor in Doha. We were talking about Gaza and talking about the global South a lot. And, there's change, but at the same time, there's horror on all sides. So that kind of stuff is very alienating. But it's like, I just want someone to know, don't mourn, organize, as Joe Hill once said. And I think we can't take this lying down. I mean, some of the denial of basic rights. ICE, just had a pronunciamento today. I mean, even if people think there should be some kind of immigration control, the basic constitutional denials here are unbelievable. And so that has to be opposed, and I thought the No Kings thing was great. It was more than performative. People really got out and were energized. I was in LA that day, we caught the end of it. But it's a very surreal time. My older son's a music director and played Dorothy Chandler with Renee Fleming and a couple of other stars. And we got there a little early, and there were like helicopters and sirens and stuff outside. So it's a very schizophrenic time, to live in, where, you can live a normal life in a moment, and then you're pulled over. My doctor's daughter is biracial. She's part Korean. She's in San Diego, and I stopped her and demanded identification based on nothing. She works for a PR agency, and so it's crazy. These are kind of right wing tactics. If I wanted to live in Hungary, I'd move there, and So I think you have to. I mean, you've always been a very optimistic guy. So I think we have to, I used to sign the autographs for this book I did on the Underground Press, Work for the Rebirth of Wonder. And I'm not sure you work for wonder, but I think that's what it's still about. That we have to
welcome it and wish for it. That's
and get put ourselves on the line for it. I just don't like the work word, but but I don't like struggle per se. But we need the rebirth of wonder, and I think that's very important for progressives, the left, or whatever. That we need a positive vision. We can't only oppose.
No, that's true.
Positive vision in the '60s, and it was however bumpy it was, and fragile and even goofy at sometimes. There was a real vision there that there could be a better world, and a world where people could live together with equality. And I think we have to hold on to that again.
No, at a time when the future of the earth is in some question. We definitely have people on the move because of climate change, et cetera. And at a time we should embrace everybody and figure out how collectively we should do it. We're creating more and more divisions and adopting policies that deteriorate the planet's health.
I mean, some of this green energy, the rollback of green energy, is especially insane. And, we just put a solar on our roof here, and, I got to worry about getting in under the wire for a tax rebate. What kind of bourgeois thing is that? But, phasing out this stuff and phasing out, electric cars, and building coal plants for political reasons and kowtowing to, it's funny, the oil industry right now is probably spending more money on alternate energy to hedge their bets. And Saudi Arabia is spending more money on alternative energy to hedge their bets.
China.
And meanwhile, we have an administration that's encouraging fossil fuels and coal. So go figure.
Abe Peck, what's your advice to young journalists and young activists, or even old ones? What they
stay the course. Figure out a way to eat, of course. But it's passion and curiosity rule, and finding the sweet spot where. And also, the organization Indivisible. I always liked their motto: "No circular firing squads." I think one of the problems we got into was purity, and we have to keep our eye on the big prize. If someone's a little different in their political outlook, than you are, there aren't enough of us to go around. And I think we have to don't sweat the small stuff and pardon the cliches, and really keep our eye on the prizes and make good trouble. As John Lewis said.
Right on. Well, we're going to run out of time. I'm a little curious to know if there's anything you'd like to share that I haven't asked you. I know you had something in one of our emails, Stones to Drones. I'm not sure what that was all about.
Oh, well, it's just I've taken an interest in, I do a lot of magazine consulting. One of the magazines covers drones, and there's so much going on there. So it's just a cute email tagline. But it's just another technology that, it's sometimes it's used for ill, sometimes it's used for very good, So for every Putin drone that's attacking Ukraine, there's a zipline drone bringing blood to people in Rwanda, but it's like there's so much new technology that if we could harness this for good, from AI to unmanned vehicles, if we can harness this stuff, it's great. If we can't, it's going to run amok. So we have to be aware of this, I think. So it's just a funny tagline. People get a yak out of.
Well, a whole lot of onward to you and all the listeners and viewers of the show. We got a lot to do. There's no shortage of things that would help make the world better, and we have to hold our ground as much as possible. And hopefully, we have elections in 2026.
Yeah, and hopefully, it won't be gerrymandered to death as they're trying to do in Texas. But,
I heard Texas is trying to gerrymander.
Yeah, trying to steal 6 seats, and Newsom.
But on the other hand, if they did it, they would have a lot of Democratic governors doing that. Not in Illinois.
Yeah, probably. It's funny is in California where I am. The good news is the bad news because we have an election commission that likes to keep it fair. But but it's a luxury in a way.
Okay, Abe. Thanks a lot.
Okay, see ya. All right, thank you. Always a pleasure to follow Corky. Take care.
Right on. The two of you are wonderful guys.